Hello everybody, we are on the final day of Nehemiah. We are on chapter 13. This has really been an amazing journey, y'all, and I've learned so much, I've grown so much, and I've matured so much throughout this entire Bible study. So I really do pray that it's been just as impactful for y'all as it has been for me. So let's go ahead and get into chapter 13 of Nehemiah. On that same day, as the book of Moses was being read to the people, the passage was found that said no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be permitted to enter the assembly of God, for they had not provided the Israelites with food and water in the wilderness. Instead, they hired Balaam to curse them, though our God turned the curse into a blessing. When this passage of the law was read, all those of foreign descent were immediately excluded from the assembly. Before this had happened, Eliashib, the priest, who had been appointed as supervisor of the storerooms of the temple of our God, and who was also a relative of Tobiah, had converted a large storage room and placed it at Tobiah's disposal. The room had previously been used for storing the grain offerings, the frankincense, various articles for the temple, and the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil, which were prescribed for the Levites, the singers, and the gatekeepers, as well as the offerings for the priest. I was not in Jerusalem at that time, for I had returned to King Artaxerxes of Babylon in the 32nd year of his reign, though I later asked his permission to return. When I arrived back in Jerusalem, I learned that Eliashib's evil deed in providing Tobiah with the room in the courtyards of the temple of God. I became very upset and threw all of Tobiah's belongings out of the room. Then I demanded that the rooms be purified, and I brought back the articles for God's temple, the grain offerings, and the frankincense. I also discovered that the Levites had not been given their prescribed portions of food, so they and the singers who were to conduct the worship services had all returned to work their fields. I immediately confronted the leaders and demanded, "Why has the temple of God been neglected?" Then I called all the Levites back again and restored them to their proper duties. And once more, all the people of Judah began bringing their tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil to the temple storerooms. I assigned supervisors for the storerooms: Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah, one of the Levites. And I appointed Hanan, son of Zakur and grandson of Mattaniah, as their assistant. These men had an excellent reputation, and it was their job to make honest distributions to their fellow Levites. Remember this good deed, O my God, and do not forget all that I have faithfully done for the temple of my God and its services. In those days I saw men of Judah treading out their wine presses on the Sabbath. They were also bringing in grain, loading it on donkeys, and bringing their wine, grapes, figs, and all sorts of produce to Jerusalem to sell on the Sabbath. So I rebuked them for selling their produce on that day. Some men from Tyre, who lived in Jerusalem, were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise. They were selling it on the Sabbath to the people of Judah, and in Jerusalem at that. So I confronted the nobles of Judah. "Why are you profaning the Sabbath in this evil way?" I asked, "Wasn't it just this sort of thing that your ancestors did that caused our God to bring all this trouble upon us and our city? Now you are bringing even more wrath upon Israel by permitting the Sabbath to be desecrated in this way." Then I commanded that the gates of Jerusalem should be shut as darkness fell every Friday evening, not to be opened until the Sabbath ended. I sent some of my own servants to guard the gates so that no merchandise could be brought in on the Sabbath day. The merchants and tradesmen with a variety of wares camped outside Jerusalem once or twice. But I spoke sharply to them and said, "What are you doing out here, camping around the wall? If you do this again, I will arrest you." And that was the last time they came on the Sabbath. Then I commanded the Levites to purify themselves and to guard the gates in order to preserve the holiness of the Sabbath. Remember this good deed also, O my God. Have compassion on me according to your great and unfailing love. About the same time, I realized that some of the men of Judah had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Furthermore, half their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or of some other people and could not speak the language of Judah at all. So I confronted them and called down curses on them. I beat some of them and pulled out their hair. I made them swear in the name of God that they would not let their children intermarry with the pagan people of the land. Wasn't this exactly what led King Solomon of Israel into sin? I demanded. There was no king from any nation who could compare to him, and God loved him and made him king over all Israel. But even he was led into sin by his foreign wives. How could you even think of committing this sinful deed and acting unfaithfully towards God by marrying foreign women? One of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib, the high priest, had married a daughter of Sanballat, the Horonite, so I banished him from my presence. Remember them, O my God, for they have defiled the priesthood and the solemn vows of the priests and Levites. So I purged out everything foreign and assigned tasks to the priests and Levites, making certain that each knew his work. I also made sure that the supply of wood for the altar and the first portions of the harvest were brought at the proper times. Remember this in my favor. Oh my God. Whoa. So there's a lot to unpack here, okay? So Nehemiah 13 is basically the final chapter, and it's very important that we understand that it's showing what happens when you're not guarding what was rebuilt, when you're not adhering to God, okay? So I'm just going to be reading some of my notes here on the side, and it says here, this chapter is basically opening up with the people reading the law again and discovering that no Ammonite or Moabite should be allowed in the assembly of God. So they immediately separate themselves from foreigners, okay? So this shows that revival must be maintained by obedience, okay? And so we're seeing here, there's a lot of disobedience going on. It's not a lot of obedience, okay? And then we also see that there is corruption in the temple. So Nehemiah, he's returned to Jerusalem and finds that Eliashib, the priest, has given Tobiah, the same enemy who mocked the rebuilding, a room inside the temple. Okay, so Nehemiah is furious, and rightfully so. He throws Tobiah's belongings out and cleanses the chambers. Okay, so this is symbolic. Don't let compromise live in the house of God. So it's so easy to allow compromise in. Okay, we have got to remain steadfast. We cannot allow anyone inside of the temple of God that is not of God. Okay, especially not an enemy who was mocking, who was ridiculing, who was trying to prevent the rebuilding of the wall. Number 3, we see the neglect of the Levites. Okay, it's a lot of neglect going on. So Nehemiah discovers that the Levites haven't been given their portions. Okay, so they've abandoned their duties. He restores order, appoints trustworthy men, and ensures that worship and service continues faithfully. And not only that, but there's Sabbath violations. Okay, so people were working and trading on the Sabbath. Nehemiah shuts the gate of Jerusalem and commands that no business be done on the holy day. So he reminds them that breaking the Sabbath was one of the sins that led to exile, okay? And he refuses to let history repeat itself again. But we could see that when Nehemiah left, it looked like history was starting to repeat itself all over again. Even though that we had learned they made basically a covenant, a vow to God, that they would remain with God, that they would remain holy and righteous, we see that just as soon as Nehemiah left, it seemed like nobody was staying true to that vow. And then number 5, and this was a promise they had also made to God, they wouldn't let their daughters or their sons marry any foreigners, okay? But number 5, intermarriage returns. So despite earlier promises, some Israelites have again married foreign women. Nehemiah rebuked them sharply, reminding them that even Solomon fell because of foreign wives. He demands purity and covenant faithfulness. So that was the difference between David and Solomon. David was a man after God's own heart. However, Solomon's heart was turned by marrying foreign wives. But God had warned Solomon that that would happen, but Solomon did it anyway. Number 6, Nehemiah's final prayer. So the book ends with Nehemiah praying. He says, "Remember me, O my God, for good." Okay? So it's a humble personal plea, not for glory, but for God's remembrance. Okay? After all the rebuilding, the revival, and the reform, Nehemiah's heart remains faithful and accountable. So we have to understand that once it's rebuilt, right? Once we get our lives together, once we're focused on God, his kingdom, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. You still have to protect and preserve the land. You cannot just let anybody in. You cannot reopen old doors. You cannot go backwards. You have to continue to go forward. Okay? And it has to be a strong, a firm foundation and relationship that you yourself have already built with God. We see that as soon as Nehemiah left, the people started to revert back. No, you can't depend on man. You have to depend on God. Nehemiah was there to restore, to help, to get everybody back on good footing, good soil, right? To get in right standing with God. But it's up to us to maintain that relationship. We cannot rely on a pastor. We cannot rely on an evangelist. We cannot rely on a apostle, a prophetess, or a prophet. We have to have a relationship with God and adhere to his word. This is not a game. Because so easily you can slip back in. You can be tempted to go back into sin, to disobey God. And what's going to happen? You will be back into captivity. Your enemies will be able to possess the land, okay? The land that you worked so hard to attain. You went through all that work to rebuild your life. You went through all that work to form that strong relationship with God. And then you throw it all away? Absolutely not. So basically the message of Nehemiah 13 is, revival is not just about rebuilding walls. It's about guarding hearts. The final chapter teaches purity must be protected, holiness must be maintained, obedience must continue, compromise must be cast out completely. Hey, don't let anybody in, okay? That's not supposed to be in your life. That's not supposed to be in the house of God, okay? Faithfulness must endure. So it's the perfect conclusion to day 13, to chapter 13. So y'all, I pray that this is revelatory, it's beneficial, and it's helpful for your walk with God. Nehemiah is showing us everything that needs to be done to stay in right standing with God. It's very simple to follow along with the way in which Nehemiah approached God, made his request known to God, remained humble throughout, and he was willing to stand up for the injustice. He didn't mind standing in and saying, you know what, this is wrong. I'm not allowing this. This is disrespectful to God. Okay? So we have to respect God. We have to respect him. We have to adhere to his word, and we have to do what he says to do. So obey God, and I'll see you for the next series. Bye-bye.